Hi, everyone. Welcome to How We Innovate at Arizona State University. We are here at the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering, and we are joined by some amazing folks. Chief among them, my dear friend and colleague, Michael Houle.
Glad to be here.
He powers the Houle Curry Law Tech Venture Challenge here at the Schools of Engineering. We have two of our tech founders, Sruthi and Zafira, here representing our Masters of Science in Innovation and Venture Development. So we're going to meet them in a second. But we also today, Michael, have a guest, Bill Binch, representing our startup tech ecosystem here in the Valley of the Sun. Bill Binch from Battery Ventures. So
welcome to the hot seat, Bill.
Great to be in the hot seat.
It's awesome to have all of you here assembled in the studio. So we're going to share some conversation. And Bill, you've got some words of wisdom to share with us, as Michael always does as well, for all of our aspiring founders and entrepreneurs like me, or intrapreneurs, whoever you might be. If you want to make change in the world, if you want to build a new product or a new service or a new way of doing things, you've come to the right place, because here at ASU, we're #1 in innovation. What does that mean? We create value. We see an opportunity, we see a gap, we see something that just doesn't feel right. And like these two, we go out and we fix it, right? Sruthi, I mean, you're doing that right now. You came over from India to come to school here with us at ASU, and you noticed right away there was a problem that you were faced with. What was that all about?
Well, India is ranked among the top 5 for vegetarian-friendly cuisines.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So since I'm from India and I'm also a vegetarian, I found it hard to find actual proper vegetarian meals. The best things I could get when I travel or go outside of my house is an Impossible Burger or a salad, or the French fries. So, and then I was like, okay, let's do a meal kit which can actually be made in less than 10 minutes, 30 minutes. So here at Thalico, we are doing meal kits, Indian authentic meal kits, which can be cooked under 30 to 10 minutes.
That's fantastic. So you're busy at home, so the timing aspect of preparing these vegetarian meals is key. So that's fantastic. So you mentioned your startup, and you're getting that off the ground. I'm assuming, Bill, it's got a software component tied to it to help with the ordering and all that good stuff. And you've only been at this just for a few weeks now, so it's exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just to hear where you stand in that process. So.
Yeah, we kind of have a very unique perspective in the meal kit, which is like, let's say you have a favorite YouTube chef, Martha Stewart, and you want to do her recipe.
Is that your favorite?
So you could
No.
just get the link, come and paste it in the website. You'll get the recipe, and you'll get the option to order the meal kit. So you'll be doing Martha Stewart's recipe at home.
Sweet. Sign me up. And it's got an Indian cuisine
It's
focus.
Yeah, it's an Indian cuisine focus.
Awesome.
So you just launched like within a month, all right, getting started on your idea. How long have you been thinking about it?
Like
what germinated this in your mind, and how long ago was that?
I came to US like in March 2021, and I kind of landed in Connecticut, and all the way from Connecticut we drove to Arizona. So I've been like the cross-country drive.
Yeah.
And I felt that I'm a foodie. I'd love to travel, and I love to go out. In India, I usually travel every year, like at least 3 months every year. So when I came here, it was a big problem for me when I wanted to travel, because food is something you can't live without.
Yeah.
And I felt that maybe we could do something like this, so it could help not just me, but the other vegan vegetarians too. So yeah, and spices are always good.
She's pretty committed to this. I mean, I've tried to talk her out of this for many weeks now, but she's all in.
Well, it's interesting because traveling, like sometimes you get cool ideas from traveling, and you realize there's something missing. Like traveling around, I remember I was traveling with someone, a young entrepreneur that had this idea because trying to connect to the internet. This was before hotspots on your phone and stuff. In Europe, and he couldn't get the internet in a lot of cafes and stuff. And it's like, this is crazy. I know each one of these places has their own internet, but not all the outsiders can access it. So came up with this plan that basically allowed you to use their guest thing or part of their whatever they have, if it's not guest, in a secure way, and you could travel and automatically link to those that are members of this network, and they get a kickback every time someone logs onto their system. So it's kind of cool.
Yep.
And it ended up turning out someone took that idea quite a ways. And a couple of years later, like, people are riding in the buses in big cities. They never lose an internet connection because they're jumping from one to the other. So it's just an idea that popped up out of necessity.
Travel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
So, Sruthi, you've had no shortage of travel experiences coming from abroad, landing on the East Coast, coming to the West Coast here in the U.S. So, we're excited to watch your journey here over the next year, maybe even 2 years while you're here studying in the U.S. So,
Yeah.
welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Brent. It's
So-
an honor to be here.
Oh, it's an honor.
It is. Well, it's an honor for all of us to be
Yeah.
next to Brent.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Brent.
Oh, I forgot.
Stop. Dr. Brent Siebold, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Zafira, good to see you.
to
So, you also, you were born and raised here in the Phoenix metro area.
Yeah.
Sun Devil for life.
Yeah.
And you came here to ASU for your undergrad and continued on in your Master's of Science in Innovation and Venture Development. And you also identified a friction point in the realm of local cuisine, right?
Yeah.
How did that come up?
Well, it came from last semester. My friend wanted to go to a food truck that he had gone a few days before, and it was 100 degrees outside, and he was like, it's up on Mill, let's just walk, 20 minutes. And we walked all the way up there, and it wasn't there, and I was so upset. And, he tried Googling it and couldn't find any information on it. And so basically what I realized is that we need a platform where food truck information is available to people, whether that's their location, their menus, pre-order options, what their price point is. And so I'm kind of working on a solution right now that can help bridge that gap between food trucks and their customers.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Food tracks.
It's called Food
yeah.
Tracks, yeah.
So we're getting
Cool.
a lot of folks within our program very excited for this technology to be unveiled. So. Awesome, Zafira. So glad you're here with us.
Glad to be here.
When did you get started on your idea?
It was early-ish last semester, so I want to say around the same time, Shruti, like March or April.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Michael, so glad that you have a chance to connect with a couple of our founders here out of the hundreds, if not thousands, we have at the university. We're lucky to have so many inventive students and faculty and others that are working to solve really cool or pressing problems in our economy and society. So one of our supporters, an ASU alum, Bill, is with us here today. So Bill, you've kind of got a front row seat to a lot of the founders here in the Valley at Battery. So thanks for being here today.
It was a privilege to be asked, so I'm happy to come give back to ASU. Obviously, as you mentioned, I'm an alumni, and so to come back and give a chance to share some stories, maybe share some wisdoms, drop a nugget or two is great.
Fantastic. So let's not wait any longer, Bill. You've seen some of the pros and cons related to being a founder and getting a new product out there. So love to hear any stories you might have related to lessons learned for some of your clients or some of the founders with whom you've worked, or if you've been a part of a team bringing a new product or service to market. I'm sure you have some chinks in the armor to tell us about.
Yeah, that's the story I'll tell, is helping bring a product to market, because one thing I'm not is a creator. I've never been on that side of going and doing my own thing. I'm a classic operator. I come in, and to set the table for today's discussion, I'm a go-to-market operator, so sales, marketing, customer success. I came out of ASU, as I mentioned, with a degree in business and emphasis in marketing, and I immediately started my career in selling, and that was 29 years ago. So came out of class of 93 here at ASU. And as I grew my career like a lot of folks, I started off selling at a very basic level, being like a sales development rep, and then moved into sales, and then moved into management and so forth. I evolved my career from being at big, large companies to going to startups. And my first startup I got to failed, and it made me really question, because I'd had 15 years of really good success prior to that. Do I have the skill set to be in a startup? And I decided at that stage of my career I was going to give it another try. And this is kind of the arc of today's story. I went and joined a young company called Marketo in 2008, which was in the marketing software space, based out of the Bay Area. And I was employee 16, so very early. The prior employees had been there pretty much to create the product, so they really hadn't monetized it yet. And I joined in May of 2008, and we had a couple $100,000 in revenue, so very early stage as far as that. The end result of that story was very successful. If you fast forward about 10 years to 2017, we ended up selling that company to Adobe for almost $5 billion. So a really amazing path. But I got to go on this incredible journey of being the 16th employee with almost no revenue and taking this product to market and watching the company grow to 10 million, to 50 million, to 100 million, to going public, and then, like I said, ultimately getting sold. But there's a classic David and Goliath story in this one. As I joined the company in 2008, and we looked at how we were going to go win, we had a couple of competitors ahead of us. We had a company that was 6 years older than us that was about 20 million in revenue, and a company that was 7 years older than us that was about 30 million in revenue. Now, 20 and 30 million isn't huge in the software world. You hear about companies like Salesforce.com and Zoom that are billions of dollars. But when you're a $200,000 a year company and you're competing against 20 and $30 million companies, they might as well be Microsoft. They might as well be the biggest company on the planet, because at that point they have more customers because they've been in market for longer. They have more money. They've been funded better, so they have more cash, so they can be a little bit more aggressive on what they do. They certainly have more employees. And quite honestly, they have more product. A company that's been around for 6 years is going to have a richer product set than you do. So you come to market and you're thinking about this from a perspective of the category has been defined, but the category is not very big. So how do we go create this category? How do we, again, not define it, but how do we create some real business? And so the team that I was with was just a wonderful team that like I said, I spent the next decade with of my career, thinking about how are we going to go win. And that was this really, really, I think, I guess you'd call it a north point or a north compass that we all were driven to, is how are we all going to go win? And so what happened was a tale of differentiation. And I remember when we went to market then, we had what we kind of called the 4 points of light, the 4 points of how we would go out to market and try and differentiate ourselves. Because again, fewer customers. We only had a handful of customers, fewer dollars in the bank, and a much smaller product. We had to go out there and win against these bigger incumbents. So we built this 4 points of light model around transparency. We are going to go be a transparent seller to our customers. And there were 4 elements that we went to. Number one, and I'll break these down in a moment, but I'll run you through all 4 real quickly. We presented our pricing on the website, just being very transparent to the buyer. Number 2, we offered a free trial of our software. And our software sold to business consumers, so it was a business-to-business sell. So we offered a free trial. Number 3, we created a thing called a trust page, which I'll back up and explain what that is in a second. And then 4th, we created an open community with the emphasis on open around this. So if I break those 4 things down, again, with a smaller product and a much smaller brand recognition, we went out there and the first thing we did was we presented our pricing on the page. Now today, 14 years later, that doesn't sound that innovative or that crazy, but I got to tell you, I got to take you back to 2008. 2008, the iPhone had just been released a year earlier. It came out in 2007. So prior to that, you didn't look at apps on a phone as a consumer. You didn't engage that way, right? You might have gone on your laptop and found an application you went to, but today as a consumer, we want an app, we go to the App Store or the Android Store, and for 99 cents or $1.99, we download it. So pricing's available, it's very transparent, it's very easy. And I like to think that this shift back then kind of helped shape that, because even today in the B2B world, you go to a website, a lot of websites have their pricing on. But you got to understand, 2008, the whole enterprise selling model had built upon this kind of concept that I need something, you offer it, I come to you, I knock on your door, and I say, how much is it? And you go, well, I need to understand about your business before I answer that. Because if I create $10 million of value for you, my software is $1 million of that.
Right.
It wasn't a fixed price. So there was this whole back and forth that would happen in the enterprise world. Well, we put our pricing right out there, so it was just clear. And like I said, it sounds, 14, 15 years later, it sounds like that's not that crazy, but that was groundbreaking at the time. It was super big innovation. But that wasn't the whole thing that we did. Secondly, we offered a trial. And in today's session, I'll talk a little bit about durable differentiators. Durable differentiators, something that's long lasting. This was a bang your fist on the table and be able to say, this is something only we can do that no one else can, which is super critical to building a moat around your product. The fact is, these software vendors that we were competing against, like I said, were 6 and 7 years old. They'd been architected at a time that their concept of how they brought their product to market was you bought it, and then you hired a professional services company to come roll it out inside your organization. And that might take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to happen, which means your time to value is delayed. We let you try the product, and it was a 2-week trial. It was 2 weeks specifically so that we could prove we can get you up, live, and launching in our product in 2 weeks and showing you value, which was just monumentally different from our competitors. Number 3, we add this thing that I call the trust page. When you're in the email marketing space, which is what we were, every buyer asks you a common question. They ask, well, Bill, what percentage of my emails get into inboxes, right? Like I don't want them going to spam or to junk files. And since this was early stage of that time, we used to track it, and we'd track like 98%, whatnot. And literally every buyer would ask that question. When every buyer asks the same question over and over again, you get to a point that like, how can I anticipate the question? So we created a site that showed that number 1, this was our email deliverability, and number 2, in 2008, the whole cloud software thing was still in its infancy. And so people would always ask you, what's your uptime? Your servers, like, is it 99.9, 99.8? So we posted all that up there and just would put it there so that when we got to the point of the sales cycle that you might ask, what's your email delivery? Like, I'm glad you asked. We actually post it publicly on our website. And then 4th, like I mentioned, an open community. We created this community where our users could come in and share ideas, submit ideas to our developers for new product things. They could work together and collaborate. They could honestly complain. They could put complaints about this isn't working well. Now, there's pros and cons with this situation. The pro was we were creating this really, I think, cult-like, almost loyal following. The downside was our competitors could read this and use it against us in a sales cycle. So there was an edgy comment there. But like I said at the beginning of this, our whole team was focused on winning. And realistically, we kind of locked arms around an idea that we're not going to spend time talking about our competitors. We're going to spend time talking about ourselves and how we solve the problem for the customer. And so we would go out into the market, and our competitors would show up, and they'd be like, they'd use some of these things against us, and I'll talk about that in a second. So it really was about us winning. It was about how do we go and create this category, and most importantly, how do we focus on solving the customer problem. So that was setting the table and kind of the problem. From a team perspective, they say it takes a village. This took a company, because it couldn't just be like one person saying something. First of all, we had to have a product and R&D team that was focused on creating the product that could get up live and launching, like I said, very quickly. We had to zig where the other folks zagged, so to speak. So number 1, I had to have a product team that was very much on that innovation mindset, that we're going to create a usable product that people get instantaneous value. Number 2, I had a marketing team that had to tell that story so that they could bring deals to the sales folks to be able to sell it. And we shamelessly swiped a term that it was a famous old Apple term. Steve Jobs used to use a term, insanely easy to use, and we used insanely simple to use. And so we had this great message arc that went out into the market. From that perspective, sales, their job was to obviously go take the customers and set the hook and run them through the cycle. And then really importantly, our customer success team had to deliver this. It didn't take a lot of customer success help for us to get live in this product, but what it did require was fast motion. So once you bought, we wanted you up and running in that. Or once you asked for the trial, we wanted you up and running, and it had to be a flawless experience. So like I said, that whole cycle of life inside of a business had to work really well. So we have a young company a mindset on how we're going to go take and create the category, and we have a team that's ready to go. So what could possibly go wrong, right? Nothing. Like it's all downhill from here, right?
What was your funding? What was your capital? How did you grow? money?
So the company had started with a $3 million investment in 2006 to get the company, funded and the developers hired and going, plus some internal money.
What was that? Was it high net worth, or was it an institution, or
It was a venture capital firm.
Oh, okay.
The three founders obviously all,
Right.
aside from their sweat equity, they put their money into it, but it was venture
Okay.
funded, and that lasted for a couple years. And right as I came in, literally the month after I came in, we went to Sand Hill Road, which you mentioned earlier, and started traipsing up and down the Sand Hill Road run and going to raise money. And that one we were successful in raising. This was important. In July of 2008, important because, as we know, in September
Everything tanked.
is when the world kind of started melting down. We raised $8 million, which was a fascinating element because in December of that year, the three founders and myself got together and we said, okay, we have this money in the bank, we have a choice: put the pedal down on the gas, or ease up. And this is again back to our competitors being bigger and larger than me. They were starting to pare down their companies. Yeah. And that has a morale hit inside of a company when you do that. We were smaller and more nimble, and we put the pedal down, and it turned out to be a good bet. But that doesn't always work out that way, I'm aware. But good question. So some of the challenges we face, some of the things that you might say were obstacles along the path. Number one, I mentioned our competitors. They could use these transparent elements that we were doing against us. They could come in and say, look, their own community is saying they don't do this functionality or they can't solve this problem. They could use the pricing against us and say anybody that puts their pricing up on is a toy, up online. Like, we're an enterprise software, that's a toy. They could say that the trial proved that. Like, they were doing their best to obviously, like in a judo move, you make your move. They're trying to react to it. They're trying to say, like, well, no, we're an enterprise grade product, which was good for the bigger companies because it did separate them. Another thing that worked against us a little later was when we launched, everything was free. So when you bought, your services to get yourself using the product were unlimited. And as you scale, that doesn't work on a growth model. You have to be able to box those things up. And our competitors again would come back and say, and this was truthful, anybody that gives away free services isn't ready for the enterprise tier. And that's true, because enterprise companies don't buy things that just like auto install themselves. They tend to say, look, we've got geographies, we've got divisions, we've got different areas of the business that you have to install this thing in. So we had to think about that. And that trial, believe it or not, the core durable differentiator for us started working against us because it became a crutch. Honestly, the sales reps, if they couldn't get a deal done, they felt they just throw the trial out there. Well, number one, a trial extends your sales cycle, which you don't like in the selling world. And number two, if you're on a losing path, you want to lose. They always say that the smartest loser in the group is the one that lost first. Like, no one likes coming in second. You like to come in fifth because it means you were probably out of it months ago. In our cycles, people were just holding on. So we had a few things that kind of were a challenge for us to get our heads wrapped around on how we went there. But overall, like I said, it was 10 years of my career, 10 years of my life, really good stuff. A couple learnings that I put down around that durable differentiator. In the technology world, there might be a service you offer, there might be an individual in your business that's amazing, but what you really, I think, need to look at is something going to be lasting that can't be repeated by your competitor. And the fact is that in the software world, if you have a feature, realistically, you have maybe 6 or 12 months of differentiation, because if it's a good feature, your competitor's going to build it. If your customer that you sell to is the same customer that they sell to, they're going to want the same kind of feature. And they'll build it eventually. And it might take some time, but they'll eventually get there. And like, what they're going to do is start pre-selling it. They're going to start messaging that, oh yes, we can tick the box on that and be able to do that. So finding a core thing, and the core thing for us was the fact that our product was architected differently. It wasn't a feature. It was that these other companies required a lot more services to go make them successful. And so that naturally pushed them out of a segment of the market, the small and mid-market part of the segment, and pushed them up to the enterprise, and allowed us to go consume the small and mid. And then that gave us the momentum to go up into the enterprise a little bit later, which we did. So my advice to founders is always think about where do you thump your chest, say this, bang your fist, this is what we do that's different that no one else can, that my customer cares about. I think that's really critical. And a really simple framework that I always like to share is create a 2x2 box, 2 boxes across and 2 boxes up and down. And in the upper right-hand corner, write what makes you different. Mm-hmm. And then you get to fill in the X and Y axis and figure out what are those things that your buyers should evaluate you on. And then put your competitors where they should be properly in that. So I think that's always a good one. And then it's a little bit of an older book. I don't know if you two have found it, but one thing I'm just a big fan of is there's a classic book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And it's a great book because the lesson that I share is that while we were building this business, I know that my competitors were back there trying to figure out how to respond. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they're saying is, wow, this company is selling almost a fixed price product with a free trial. We don't want to do that because we've got 7-8 years at this point of history, and that changes our model. And oh, by the way, we charge for professional services and they don't. So are we going to go take money out of our own mouth? And no, they didn't. They refused to innovate. And what happened was a new model came along and changed the way that software was being sold. And so, like I said, that 10-year period, we ultimately ended up being the victor of that space. And so, like I said, we didn't define the space, but we really helped create the category. And then if you look back and ask people, that marketing automation space, who was the winner, most people point to Marketo as being the place that won.
Fantastic. Was it Christensen that wrote Innovator's Dilemma?
Yeah.
I should know this.
Yeah.
He's one of the, rest in peace, by the way, godfathers of all the things that we're learning in the master's program and at the undergraduate level in this space. So I'm glad you referenced that, because this whole idea of creative destruction and really kind of outmaneuvering things that are being done and how do you become more nimble, some of those takeaways from your journey.
The cycles are so fast now that, like in the software world, it used to be that if you created a good product and got some market traction, that you probably had 3-4 year run before someone else was going to come around. Now it's just so fast. It's
3
months.
or 4
It's
months.
Yeah, it's fast.
Wow. Yeah.
So with for these guys, they're very early, and they probably have all kinds of possibilities that they could pursue or ways to go, and they're at the point where they're trying to figure out what's our path, which path do we focus on, and so my question is, when you talked about doing product innovation based on feedback from customers and things like that, how do you decide when to stop adding or innovating or adding new features based on customer experience or whatever, and just go for it and pick something to sell and sell it and move forward with it, and then, so that's one question. And then the other question is, when and how often do you tinker with it once you go down that path, once you start selling? So you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. First things first is in the business to business space, you talk about customers. In the consumer space, you talk about users. And the most important thing is getting those users or customers, depending on who you're selling to. In the business to business space, which is most of my experience, I talk about logos. All I want is customers using my product so that they can give me feedback, because they do help shape the direction of where it goes. And so, the fork in the road of, when do you just build a product that's minimally viable and put that out? I think you work to get that out very quickly, and you start looking to get the customer experience, the customer interaction, and the customer experience of people being able to use your product and provide you that feedback. As far as the innovation goes, there's a lot around innovation. I'm a big fan of this concept called furious pace of innovation. There's some really great writings out there around how you think about innovation. And I had the fortune of working with a woman that was at Google, working on Google Maps in the early days. And she has this concept that she calls ticks and talks. And I really love this framework. The fact is that innovation should be constant. And those are ticks. Ticks might just be a user interface. In the software world, it might be a user interface improvement. It might be a speed improvement. It might be a small feature. But it's got to be occasionally built around the concept of a talk. And a talk is a bigger level tick. It's something where maybe you're bundling up something that might be a different SKU, meaning a different priced add-on product, an expansion product or something like that. And I think the way that development teams need to think about things is visualize you have a product, visualize you have tons of users or tons of customers, and visualize that you have an annual user summit, right, where your buyers, your users come and meet up and share ideas and share best practices and learn more about the product. Well, at that user summit, you probably got somebody from your organization standing on stage saying, guess what, everybody, this is what we've worked on for the last 12 months. And this is what we're announcing is coming. And if you look at like some of the great companies of the world, like Apple's like famous for this. They're secretive. They have an announcement coming up, and all of a sudden you see the internet light up on like this new thing is going to come out on the iPhone, or they're going to announce the new iWatch or whatever it is. And what they do is they say, since we last got together, this is what our team in the background has been working on. So I think from a commercial perspective, you got to build a product, you got to get to minimum viable product level, and you've got to get it out and get customer experience, whether that be a beta and free users or paid users. You've got to get that feedback coming back. Because quite honestly, it builds confidence in the organization that someone cares for the time that you put into coming up with the idea and building the product. And then from there, I think the innovation cycle is pretty consistent.
Great question. Great answer. Founders, any clarifying questions based on Bill's story of his trials and tribulations with that amazing 10-year sprint?
Yeah. So just a real quick clarification question. So when you came up with the idea of being transparent, was that at like when the startup was founded, or was that something you guys integrated after being in the industry for a little bit?
So I joined 2 years into the history of the company. They had really come up. They actually had built they had a vision for a different product than they ended up doing, which is also another thing about innovation. Is a lot of times where you start isn't always where you finish. So they had created that, but I think the founding team was very much from that mindset that, you know, we're going to take the high road. We're not going to focus on, like when we competed, we would not talk about what our competitor didn't do. Mm-hmm. We would talk about what we did and why our customers should care about it. And we literally lost deals because some customers were like, but your competitor says this about you. And we were like, we don't care what they say. And they'd be like, do you have a data sheet to compare you against? No, we don't spend the time doing it. You know why? We take that time and spend it understanding what your problem is and how we solve it for you. So I think the founders had that mindset of we're going to take a high road of how we go to market. And that was interesting for me leading sales. There were a couple times that I really wanted to go do like a competitive program, and my CEO was like, just don't think that fits into the values of the company. And I had to, he wore 4 stripes, I wore 3 stripes in the pecking order, so at some point I had to stand down. But those values I think were mostly there. As far as how we translated them and go to market, I think we started building those. And did we come up with those 4 things before we ever shipped the product and sold it? No. We put it out there and we started seeing that people were, this is why I said logos or getting laps around the block. People were saying, you know what, we really love that your pricing's on the website because now I don't have to call you up every time I say, well, maybe if we buy 10 users instead of 5, what's the price? Like I can just go figure it out. And then people started saying, we really love the fact that you gave us a trial. So we could see from the customer experience, things were clicking. And that was what helped shape that story into when we went out in front of a customer and they said, pencils down, why are we going to pick you? Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you about us.
Okay. Yeah, my follow-up question was, how did that validation come into place for you guys, knowing that, your differentiator was being transparency, but you touched on that a little bit there. So I'll let Shruti ask a question.
Well, comment is just on that.
Yeah.
So so one thing you're probably thinking about in your missions is, number one, what's our TAM, our addressable market? Like you said, everybody eats, all right? So we got that part, right? And next, it might get down to vegetarians that like Indian food, and like you're gonna figure out your TAM. So you have your TAM. Within your TAM, you have your buyer, right? And in the business world, it tends to be, I either sell to IT or finance or some function inside the business. We sold to marketers. It was pretty clear that in our differentiation message, we were going out there and we were trying to help marketers be more productive in their job, which at the time was that message really, really landed well. But it was interesting because, to your question about innovation, we thought, well, where are we going with this? And one of the things that we started to continue to differentiate on was our vision. And I mentioned this furious pace of innovation. I mentioned the TikToks. There's a lot of ways to think about that from a framework perspective. But one thing that we started thinking about was, where does our product go? And we started thinking about a product that, if you're in marketing, marketing's role is to set up sales to succeed. Right? That's what the mission of marketing really is. So how can we take our product that helps sales even more? Because if you get into a company and you get the head of marketing and the head of sales aligned and saying, I want to spend money on something, it's really hard to say no to that. And so we thought, if we had a derivative of our product or a version of our product, we didn't want to sell to a different buyer, but we wanted something downstream for sales, then we get the sales piece locked up. So we started dreaming up our next product around that. And then we also said, well, wait a second, in the marketing world, people spend a lot of money on marketing and they can't measure the efficacy of that marketing. Our product helps you do that. Well, who cares about that? Well, the CFO and the CEO really do, because they say in the marketing world, I spend 100% of my budget on marketing and I know where 50% of it went, and you can't track the other 50%. The other 50%, you're like, I don't know the impact of where I spent it on search engine optimization or whatever it is, We helped do that. We helped that. So our next product, our third product, was really focused on how do we give something that the CFO and the CEO can take away from this. And it was this really kind of like three legs of the stool message, because when we sat down and we were in head-to-head competition, sometimes we were winning, sometimes we weren't. But what we could do is point towards the future and say, let us tell you how we're thinking about this. And I got to tell you, when those sales cycles were great, so when we got into organizations, and we got the marketing and the sales team like really frothy and wanting to go with us. And then we went to the next level of approval, which was the CFO or the CEO, and they said, well, why do I care about this? We could paint this picture of why you're going to care about this. And so a lot of times people would start buying us on our vision. So back to your innovation, having that story, that roadmap that you can tell is really important.
Yeah.
We skipped over another kind of important decision point, and that is, how do you pick your price? How do you decide your pricing when you're first launching? I mean, especially if you've discovered, hey, my product will sell for X, but it'll also sell for Y. Which one will we roll out on? And like, what kinds of things do you go through in your mind about making the decision on how to price?
This is a great question. First of all, in the software world, there's an evolution that's occurring right now. If you look at most business-to-business software, what they typically do is they say, well, how many users do you have? You're $99 a month, and like there's some pricing that's built around that. And now companies are going to more of a utility-based pricing, which is, look, you're going to come buy my software and you pay some minimum amount, and that's just guaranteed in the contract. And then the price you pay me is based on your usage. And think about any software that's sold to the education space. Pretty quiet in the summer, right? Because the students all go on break. But in the August, September timeframe spikes up. And so that kind of software meters based on where the usage is, which I think is a great move, because honestly, it sets a lower barrier to entry for the buyer to get in because it's minimum base. And secondly, it lets the buyer extract value based on their true usage, not just based on that you've come up with an arbitrary price. But specifically to your question, I used the term logos earlier, and logos could be a company logo, or it could be a user. So use it kind of in both forms here. I'm a big advocate of, as a company's young and launching, not worrying so much about like what my average sale price is, and more that someone's willing to pay for it. And so you're going to find some kind of place to start. And my, like a great strong suggestion that I'd give is just think about looking at logo acquisition, because again, that's validating that your product is wanted by somebody. And so like the Marketo story is interesting along that. I got there and we had some pricing and we had an average sale price. And I talked with the founders and I said, look, we are a venture-backed, money-losing startup, which is what the model for Silicon Valley is. You lose money for a long time. do we really care about what the average sale price is? And like, that's a high contrast question. Like, yes, of course we cared, but we're 2 months into selling this thing.
Yeah.
Do we really care what our customers? And we kind of got around the table and said, no. And it freed us up to do something. And what we did was when we hired sales reps, we gave them quotas based on acquiring logos as opposed to the size of the deal. Because size of the deal slows things down. A sales rep gets caught up in wanting to maximize the deal. Well, no. Let's talk about what you're going to do in the future, and let me try and grow this thing. It slows the deal down. I just want customers. And so we created a pricing, or we created a base pricing, and then we put it out there, and we just went after logos for the first year of our being in existence. And it was great because I think we naturally settled into what the average selling price is. And then that was used to go shape a more sophisticated pricing model. So very B2B centric type of example there,
Yeah.
but a thought, maybe a model to think about.
Okay, good.
Okay. Suruthi?
So, as student founders, we are either a one-person army or a team of co-founders. But when it comes to a one-person army, when do you think we should be taking people in and starting to get help with actual prototypes? Because we are like juggling with every single job as a CEO, CFO, CMO, and everything. So, when do you think it's the right time to get people in the team?
It's a big question, because one of the benefits of, I think, doing this while you're in school is that you have an echo chamber around you of professors, of advisors, of other students to be able to help you. And, sometimes you can just see something when it's clicking, and other things are harder. Like, you two probably know the story, you two may not, but Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, when he presented this idea of the model of FedEx, he got an F on his papers. His instructor said,
So harsh.
This is going to fail, right? And we all know what FedEx is today, right? So the idea back then was so innovative, so creative that it was just broken. So one of the great, so like my point of telling you that story is like not everybody around you in that echo chamber is right all the time, but nonetheless, being in university helps you because you have this support network around you of seeing, like, is it time to try and go figure this out? And at that point, as an individual founder, what you've got to figure out is if this person is going to come on, are they going to require money? Or are they going to work for free like I am? And at that point, like, you're an army of one, like you said. Now you're an army of two. That means you're probably giving some portion of the company away. So there's some downstream economic things you've got to think about in doing that. Versus if you're out of university, the classic model is you go find friends and family, early level investors to go give you some money because they believe in you, they believe in the idea or something like that. In university, like I said, there's a little bit of a built-in network there. So just a couple of thoughts to think about as you explore the path.
There's a little caution, just I can't help it.
No, I was going to ask you to follow up on that.
When you start adding people, one of the huge mistakes that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs do is they give away their equity too freely to early people that they anticipate will add a lot of value to the organization, and they don't think it through carefully enough. What happens if that person doesn't add the value, or what happens if they don't perform, or they get distracted, or they work on something else, whatever. So you definitely, if you're going to be dealing with your equity, you have to have some mechanism to claw it back. You have to have a vesting arrangement. And, just think about it carefully, because so many entrepreneurs, that's one of the things, if you ask them, what mistakes, what would you do over? They would look at, like, people that they brought on and giving away too much equity too early. Like, don't be psycho about it, but make sure you have some ability to make sure they perform. That's the key.
Thank you.
And so, Michael, you're also one of our champions here on campus of, bringing together this university ecosystem that Bill referenced. So, Michael's been a long champion of an event we do every year now. We're in our second annual year, but it dates back almost a decade, something called Techie Palooza, where we bring together technical and business founders to kind of collide in the same room with some pizza and some caffeine and other things. So
And people like Bill to give wisdom.
yeah,
Yeah,
of
we
course.
bring in-
So
yeah.
and other venues, right, where we hope
Yeah.
these collisions will take place. But you know, I what I try to share with the founders is, you know, in addition to the legal aspect that you just mentioned in terms of equity sharing, is really aligning with the mission to solve the problem. Like if finding the people in the community that are equally rabid about and excited about solving this, and the hope is when you're choosing, you're finding somebody that has a completely different skill set than you. So if you're kind of more the business or sales piece, maybe you're looking for that technical co-founder. It starts with identifying who's also upset about this, that would want to invest their time and their energy. And tell me if I'm wrong on this, but when we get to that next stage of formalizing that relationship, is a vesting schedule, is that similar to a prenuptial agreement that I have with my spouse? No, just kidding. Is it wrong for me as not a lawyer to characterize it as kind of a prenup among founders, or is that reckless?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my mind doesn't make the connection that well because I think of marriage kind of as forever. So,
I hope my wife's not watching this right now.
but no, the point is, like I always drag this story out because it's a real one and it repeats itself. So I had an MD and an engineer that created a medical device. The MD, his job was to like write white papers, do all kinds of technical stuff in the field, and the engineer was to create the product, innovate the product, build the team. And so they're like, we're 50-50. Like, you guys, you got to think about, no, that's condescending. We're each 50-50. We're not going to have any vesting or anything like that. Well, about 8 months into it, the doctor decides to retire and move to Hawaii, and he stopped contributing, right? And so, to make a long story short, when I asked the engineer after raising $40 million, the doctor was the second largest shareholder in the company. And the engineer would say, that's the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. And every time his name comes up, it irritates me and I have to take Xanax. So like, you don't want to be that
Prescribed.
person. And it's an easy thing to fix, right? It's so simple to fix right up front. When there's not a lot of value, people say, yeah, that makes sense. But also think about it, when you're joining forces with somebody, it goes both ways. I mean, like you're both, if it's sweat equity, you know, like if you're contributing sweat services, then you have to make sure that actually gets delivered. And so why would you give your equity away in advance if that hasn't been delivered yet? So you have to have some ability to, okay, you get this, but if you aren't here or you're not meeting these milestones, it comes back because I got to find your replacement. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to use that equity to find your replacement. So it's just something that is really easy to fix in the beginning, but it's a monumental mistake if you don't correct it. So
Yeah, great. Fantastic. Michael, I don't know about you, but I think it's been a fantastic session here
Yeah.
with Bill joining us and our two co-founders from our MSIBD program. So thanks to all of you for being here. And Bill, I want to just close by saying thanks for your key takeaways. I think it's
thank you.
really important to drive home what I heard you describe is the company's unique value proposition. So I love the quote you had about banging your chest. We talk ad nauseum with our founders about the competitive analysis and really kind of separating yourself from the other options that the buyers and the users have when they're deciding whether to either download or go to their website or make the purchase. Such a great lesson you shared. So, Bill, anything else that you want to share with us before we jump off set here today?
Yeah, a fun story is to close. When I was at Marketo, we started in this little, very founder-ish startup office, and then when we took our second round of financing, we moved to some like more what I call pro level, and I got this office which had a classic whiteboard on the wall. And I remember I used to talk about differentiation so much, I drew a little box that looked like an 8x11 sheet of paper, and I wrote differentiator. Like, just like it was a PowerPoint slide, differentiator. And I wrote those words I said earlier, something only you do, that no one else can, that your customers care about. And it was pretty interesting. I wrote that in probably 2010, and I remember when I left the company in 2017, like at that point we'd grown our offices, and I'd left that office and moved to another floor, but I asked the people that took the office, said, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you always leave it there? And when I left in 2017, it was still up there.
Wow,
It had
that's
never
cool.
been,
It's a good
it
story.
had never been erased or anything like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. That was
Yeah.
pretty cool thing.
Here at the university, we write a little note that says "Do not erase," and then we draw a line around it. But yeah, at your fancy offices in California or wherever that was,
It was.
I'm glad it's still there to
Yeah.
this day, likely.
Hopefully.
So. All right, thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being
All right.
here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Sruthi and Zafira, go get to work. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.